For some backstory, I worked as a valet in a small coastal city in college, and the restaurants I worked for were very popular for both locals and tourists. We'd generally be busy year-round, but as the restaurants are both water, front spring, summer, early fall are our peak seasons per se. The downside to these restaurants is that parking can be a huge pain. Combined, the restaurants can seat around 400 people at any given time and can usually turn over about 2,500 seats on a busy weekend. But the parking lot can only hold about 60-70 cars at a time, which isn't much at all. That's why I, the valet, am there. We have about 30 designated valet spots, used to have double that amount. But I digress, and are really good about utilizing all of them efficiently so we can park as many cars as possible, thus getting as many tips as possible. Being that the valet spots are kind of in a weird spot, but really close to the restaurants in our standard, and there aren't any signs that say valet only, we usually show up a bit early and comb the spots off so people know they aren't for self-parking. Now, most people see the cones and recognize those spots are pretty clearly not available, but some people are so dumb or jerks that they will move the cones and park in our spots anyways. Disclaimer: there's a parking garage for overflow parking, but people don't particularly like using it. People do this pretty regularly, and we're usually pretty cool about it. One of the valets will normally just walk up to them as they are parking and tell them that the spot is reserved for valet, and they'll usually comply. Obviously, this was not the case yesterday, or I wouldn't be writing this right now. While we were in full swing last night, some doge. Bag is not 100 feet from me, moving a cone so he can try to sneakily take one of our spots. I was talking to a customer, so I wasn't able to immediately go tell him to not park there. After finishing up talking, I walked over to Douch as he was getting out of his car and immediately knew I had encountered this exact guy trying to do this nonsense before. After this encounter, I knew revenge was going to be necessary. Our conversation went as follows. I told him, "Hey man, I'm sorry, but these spots are for valet only. That's why we have the cones set up. If you'd like to self-park, you can park in this main lot, pointing to the full lot, or in the parking garage. But there's nowhere to park in that lot, and I don't want to park in the parking garage. You guys always do this to me. So if I valeted, I could just park here. That's nonsense, bro. I'm parking here whether you like it or not." I was pretty taken aback and basically just walked away, not wanting to get into a fight over a parking spot. I knew it was time this guy learned his lesson. Now, I don't have the authority to tow his car or give him a boot, and I wouldn't anyways because I'm not a jerk. But my power is in the pure number of cars I have access to. Luckily, he did this at about 8 p.m. I contractually only have to be there until 10 p.m., at which time I can park the remaining cars in certain places and then leave the keys with the bartenders inside. Most nights I would stay to get the tips, but tonight I was dropping keys. Conveniently, Douch had parked in the area where we moved cars to before we dropped the key. My plan: use the valeted cars to block douche in and then leave with him having no way of leaving until the cars around him left. There was one car that would be particularly important, the one directly in front of him. I had a special car for that spot. It was owned by a restaurant employee that I knew wouldn't be off until 2 a.m. Perfect. I maneuvered all the cars around him in a way that didn't make me look like I was intentionally blocking him, but in a way that made it look like I had no other choice. Everything fell into place perfectly, and I could already feel a justice chub starting to form. I went inside to drop the keys and explain to the restaurant manager what happened and my revenge. She loves us and said she'd 100% have our backs, which I figured she would. I told her to text me and tell me how everything played out. This is the text I received last night at around 11 p.m. The guy just came up to me mad. He said there was a car blocking him from leaving and that it needed to be moved immediately so he could leave. I tried to explain that you guys have to put cars there before you leave and that you even told him to not park there. I guess that made him mad, so he started raising his voice at me. Bar manager saw and told me that he had been drinking for a while, which I assumed from the beginning. I told him that I couldn't, for liability reasons, allow him to drive home since he had been drinking. He got really mad because he lives 40 minutes drive away, but ended up taking an expensive Uber home. She told me she slipped in the argument that he was going to get another ride whether he liked it or not. Edit. Just a couple things to add to clarify some things. This is a privately owned parking lot, as most parking lots are. The restaurants who owned it gave us permission to use this lot and told us where they wanted our spots to be. Just because something is open to the public doesn't mean it's not privately owned. These restaurants also did not want us towing booting cars. 99% of the time, US going up and telling people they couldn't park, there was sufficient, and they would move or give us their keys and we could move their car if needed. If not, we'd whine to them, but ultimately couldn't do much. This happened several years ago. I no longer live in this town nor valet. There were some signs that said valet parking only, just not enough in my opinion, like 2 signs for 20-25 spots. So there I was, knee-deep in the messiest breakup of my life, tangled up with a woman we'll call Karen. Man, she was trouble with a capital T. We were cruising through life, married with a couple of ankle biters, doing the family thing. Little did I know, Karen was harboring a secret affair with her boss. Classic move, right? Fast forward to the day I stumbled upon the unfaithful truth. Picture this. I'm scrolling through texts, minding my own business, and bam! There it is, clear as day. Lovey-dovey messages between Karen and her boss, the same boss who had a thing for shredding our marriage vows like confetti. Now, I ain't the type to throw a tantrum. Nah, I kept it cool. Confronted Karen, told her we were done, but here's where it gets wilder than a rodeo clown riding a bull. Turns out, we had this shared account, set up for our kids' college fund. Trying to be responsible parents and all. But lo and behold, Karen, in her newfound passion for wrecking lives, decided that money was better off in the hands of her boss. Boyfriend. I catch wind of this financial foul play, and let me tell you, I was hotter than a jalapeno in a salsa contest. We have this heated exchange, words flying like a verbal hurricane, and it becomes clear Karen, in all her entitled glory, thought she could siphon off our kids' college fund to play sugar mama to her boss. That's when the proverbial gloves came off. I could have gone for the usual divorce trauma, but no, not me. I decided to take this to the legal rodeo. Lawsuit time, baby. Now, the legal mumbo-jumbo ain't my usual scene. I'm just a regular guy working a 9-to-5 trying to keep my head above water. But when someone messes with my kid's future, it's a whole new ball game. Cue the lawyer, a sharp-talking bulldog with a briefcase. We're going through the motions, gathering evidence, building a case that could stand up in court. Meanwhile, Karen's probably out there, sipping on some overpriced latte, thinking she's got it all figured out. Legal letters start flying like confetti at a New Year's Eve party. Karen's lawyer, probably straight out of some cheesy legal drama, is throwing every argument at us, hoping something sticks. But we got receipts, text messages that read like a soap opera script, and a bank trail that can make a financial detective blush. The court date arrives, and let me tell you, I was more nervous than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. The courtroom, with its stern-faced judge and the echo of hushed whispers, felt like a different planet. Karen, with her "I'm innocent" act, struts in like she's walking the red carpet. But the evidence layout against her was tighter than a drum. Texts, bank statements, witnesses. It was like a legal buffet of gotcha moments. As the proceedings unfold, it becomes clear that Karen wasn't just dealing with a scorned ex-husband. She was facing the consequences of her actions, and they were coming down like a ton of bricks. The judge, stone-faced and unimpressed, drops the verdict like a final chord in the courtroom symphony. Guilty. The word hangs in the air, and I swear, you could cut the tension with a butter knife. Legal repercussions start piling up faster than bills on a Monday morning. Karen's looking at fines, restitution, the whole legal circus. Meanwhile, I'm just sitting there trying not to break into a victory dance. It's not about revenge. It's about justice, about making things right for my kids. The aftermath is like a storm settling. Karen, stripped of her entitled illusions, is facing the music. The boss, boyfriend, well, he's probably realizing that being a homewrecker comes with a hefty price tag. Life moves on, as it always does. I'm still me, just a regular guy, but now with a story that sounds like something out of a daytime soap. The kids' college fund? Well, it's back where it belongs, untouched by the chaos their parents created. UPS smashed a nearly new MacBook that I sent with them. I asked them nicely to pay me back for it, and they replied about it, blaming me, blaming my packaging, saying it was impossible they damaged it, etc. I was able to prove my packaging was flawless and get a statement from the Apple shop that I took it to say that the damage was caused by being drop thrown. I could also prove it worked when I sent it. They weren't interested and messed me about for weeks, sending me from pillar to post, even threatening to make me pay interest on customs charges, which I wasn't liable for as the laptop was smashed on arrival and thus worthless at import. I took it to small claims. They hired a lawyer who sent me letters saying they contested it and would go for full fees, etc. if I lost. I went for it anyway. I did law stuff university, so I knew the basics, and I thought my case was pretty clear-cut. I won. I won my costs back, plus extra, plus interest. They ignored the court order and did not pay. Now, this laptop was originally being sent to my beloved mother-in-law. She asked me to help her with the problem as UPS were also seriously harassing her for the customs fees. However, very unexpectedly, before I could resolve it, she passed away. It was the last thing she ever asked me to do for her. I love that woman more than pretty much any human on this planet. She was my mother, my best friend, and my mentor. Taking down UPS was now my personal vendetta. I researched my options. I could have taken the usual, more conservative, legal routes to reclaim my money. But no, screw them. I don't care about the money anymore. I want revenge. I want drama. I want justice. I went to the high court. I got a writ of control. I, of course, added on more fees and more interest. I then hired the most aggressive bailiff firm in London. I trusted the bad processes and attitude of UPS to mean they would ignore the letters and actually get a visit. They did. The bailiffs rock up at UPS headquarters and explain the situation. UPS refuses to pay, so the bailiffs start listing goods. Security tries to make them leave. The office manager tries to bully them out. Obviously, the bailiffs didn't care one bit and they cracked on with their jobs. I wasn't allowed the body cam footage, but they did send me a detailed report. The final conclusion is copied from it below. Calls were then made to the accounts manager, who arrived in a hurry. As no payment was forthcoming from them, the agent again explained the removal process and costs involved and called the office for approval to begin removal. The agent began to seize assets. The finance director then arrived on the scene. He was not at all happy about the attendance, but ultimately agreed to pay a voluntary payment in full from his personal account in order to stop the removal. I know it's a drop in the ocean to UPS, but I got more than double what I originally asked for to replace the laptop. They would have had to pay even more on top of fees to the bailiffs. I reckon it cost them at least 3 times more than the original claim in the end. But mostly, I just enjoy the mental image of the flustered finance director and his impotent rage, having to pay his own money to stop the heavies taking desktop computers and fancy pot plants and things out of their swanky head office lobby. This happened a couple of years ago, but I was just listing some stuff for sale on eBay, so it brought a literal nightmare of entitled buyers. A few years ago, a close friend passed away from cancer. He was a gamer and had been collecting everything under the sun related to it. A year or so later, after his wife and our gaming group got to pick from his collection so we could keep the games that reminded us of him, she wanted to start selling the items to help pay off some of the remaining medical debt. I spent hours pricing items and sorting what would go to local game stores, a local used bookstore, and eBay. While she and the group did the local stores, I started listing items on eBay. Most sales went through just fine, but then I listed an original James Bond metal lunchbox with thermos in near mint condition. Here comes our entitled person. He submitted an offer that was almost half of the base listing price. I counter-offered as I had seen what these were selling for. Next thing I know, he's messaging me with a sob story about how he really wanted it as a big James Bond fan but couldn't afford the asking price. I know this is a common scam, so I checked his profile. He's a reseller on eBay, so I'd be selling him the lunchbox only for him to turn around on his own account and listing it for much higher, as that seemed his history. While he was whining about how high the price was someone used the Buy It Now feature, so he lost it. He started spamming me that we were in negotiation, and he had first dibs. No dice, so I block him. Next thing I know, he tried to file a complaint with eBay, but they apparently turned him down as he had not actually bought anything. Second scenario had me leaving eBay for almost 2 years as a seller. There was a sealed box of Pokemon cards that was over a decade old. This set potentially had cards in it worth over $50,000, so I sold it as sealed rather than risking opening it and finding common junk cards. Within an hour of listing it and getting bids, I had over 30 messages telling me the selling price was too high, and I was scammers, so to prove I wasn't a scammer, I needed to direct sell to them at X much lower than the current bid on it. I came close to deleting the listing, except the money that was being bid would go a long way to helping my friend. Over the next week, had set the auction for that long. I got so many more messages like that, and worse, like people wanting to buy it for $10,000 if I did a direct sale and close the eBay listing. Does anyone still fall for that?